They could see the fires of Ithaca. After years of war and weeks of disaster, Odysseus and his men were close enough to recognize the people tending those fires on the shore. Then Odysseus fell asleep. The journey had begun again on the floating island of Aeolus, keeper of the winds. A wall of unbreakable bronze circled the island, and sheer cliffs rose from the sea. Aeolus welcomed Odysseus for a full month, listening as he told the story of Troy and the scattered Greek fleet. When Odysseus asked to leave, Aeolus gave him an extraordinary gift. He flayed the hide of a great ox, bound every dangerous wind inside it, and fastened the bag in Odysseus's ship with a shining silver cord. Only the west wind remained free, breathing steadily toward Ithaca. For 9 days and nights, Odysseus held the steering oar. He would not surrender it to another man. On the 10th day, his homeland rose ahead of them. That was when exhaustion overcame him. The crew gathered around the sealed bag. For days they had watched Odysseus guard it. They decided Aeolus must have filled it with gold and silver. Their captain, they muttered, always returned from foreign halls with honors while they received nothing. Envy supplied the answer that trust had not. They untied the silver cord. Every captive wind burst out at once. The sea turned white. The ships were swept backward, while the sailors cried out, and Odysseus woke to see Ithaca disappearing behind the storm. For a moment, he considered throwing himself into the water. Instead, he covered his head and endured, as the gale drove them all the way back to Aeolus. Odysseus returned to the palace carrying no treasure, only shame. He begged for help again. Aeolus refused. "The gods must hate you," he said. "No man driven back by heaven may remain beneath my roof." The fleet left with no wind gift and no hope. For 6 days the men rowed without rest. On the 7th, they entered the harbor of Telepylus, land of the Laestrygonians. Cliffs closed around the water, and a narrow mouth led into a basin so calm that every captain moored his ship against the rocks. Every captain except Odysseus. He left his vessel outside the entrance, tied to the end of the headland, and sent 3 men inland. They met a young woman drawing water. She directed them to the palace of her father, King Antiphates. Inside, they found his wife, a woman enormous as a mountain. She called her husband. Antiphates seized one scout and prepared him as a meal. The other 2 ran. At their cries, giants poured from every height above the harbor. They hurled rocks larger than any man could lift. Timber split. Men screamed. The trapped ships shattered against one another, while the Laestrygonians speared sailors from the water like fish. Odysseus drew his sword and cut his own cable. He shouted for the crew to row. Their ship shot through the narrow mouth, while rocks fell behind them. The other 11 ships were destroyed. The single survivor sailed on, grieving for hundreds of companions. It reached Aea, the island of Circe. For 2 days the exhausted men remained beside the black ship. On the 3rd, Odysseus climbed a hill and saw smoke rising through the forest. On his way back, he killed a great stag and carried it to the shore. The crew ate and drank until sunset, taking one brief comfort after so much death. The next morning, Odysseus divided the men into 2 groups. Chance sent Eurylochus with 22 companions toward the smoke. They found a stone house in a clearing. Wolves and lions moved around it, but instead of attacking, the animals rose on their hind legs and fawned like tame dogs. From inside came a woman's beautiful singing and the sound of a loom. Circe opened her shining doors. All the men entered except Eurylochus. She seated them on chairs and mixed cheese, barley, honey, and dark wine. Into the meal she stirred a drug that would erase the memory of home. When they had eaten, Circe struck them with her wand. Their heads, voices, bodies, and bristles became those of swine. Their minds remained human. She drove them weeping into a pen and scattered acorns before them. Eurylochus returned alone. At first, terror left him unable to speak. When the story finally came, Odysseus buckled on his sword and started for Circe's house. He met a young man in the forest. It was Hermes, the messenger god, carrying a golden wand. Hermes warned that courage alone would not save him. He pulled a plant from the earth. Its root was black, its flower white as milk. The gods called it moly. No mortal could easily tear it from the ground. "Take this," Hermes said. "Circe's drug will fail. When she strikes you with her wand, draw your sword. Make her swear by the gods that she will do you no harm." Odysseus entered the stone house. Circe gave him the same golden cup. He drank. She touched him with her wand and ordered him to the sty. Nothing happened. Odysseus drew his sword and rushed forward. Circe cried out, fell to her knees, and recognized the man Hermes had foretold, the one man who could drink her potion and remain himself. She offered him her bed. Odysseus did not lower his sword until she swore the binding oath. Then he demanded his companions. Circe went to the pen and touched each animal with another drug. The bristles vanished. The men stood upright again, younger and more beautiful than before. They clung to Odysseus and wept. Even Circe felt pity. She sent servants to bring the remaining crew from the shore. Eurylochus warned them not to go. He remembered the Cyclops and blamed Odysseus for every man lost in that cave. Odysseus nearly killed him in anger, but the crew intervened. At last, they all entered Circe's halls. She told them to eat, drink, and recover the strength grief had taken from them. They stayed for a year. No chains held them. No storm blocked the harbor. Comfort did what monsters and magic could not. It made the purpose of the journey fade. At last, the crew approached Odysseus. "Remember your country," they said, "if you are ever meant to see your home again." Odysseus went to Circe and asked her to keep her promise of passage home. "You may leave," she answered, "but not for Ithaca. First you must sail beyond the stream of ocean, to the house of Hades and dread Persephone. There you must consult the dead prophet Tiresias. Only he can tell you the road home." Odysseus's heart broke. He sat on the bed and wept. No living pilot knew that voyage. Circe told him the winds would guide the ship. She described the dark shore, the rivers of the underworld, the trench he must dig, and the blood that would call the dead. At dawn, Odysseus woke his men. He did not soften the news. They tore their hair and beat the earth. Their relief had lasted one night. Their next harbor belonged to the dead. One companion never heard the warning. Elpenor, the youngest, had climbed to Circe's roof to sleep away from the others. Still heavy with wine, he woke at the noise, forgot the ladder, stepped from the edge, and fell. His neck broke. His spirit descended before his friends knew he was gone. The men reached the shore and found a black ewe and ram waiting beside the ship, Circe's final provision for the ritual ahead. They had begun this book close enough to see Ithaca's fires. Now 11 ships were gone. A year had disappeared in comfort, and the one ship left to them was pointed toward a country from which no living traveler returned. Home had been in sight, but the road to it now ran through the dead.